hardest either class or just part of the education process to become an X-ray tech for you?
I was required to take anatomy and physiology before I even got into the X-ray program. That was a lot. Anatomy and physiology is broken up into two courses. And that's basically you getting your basic overview of all the systems of the body, muscles, organs, the endocrine system, bones. I might not be working with the adrenal glands at my current time, but it was still something that I was required to learn about. So anatomy and physiology, those two courses in of themselves were very challenging. A lot of memorization. But then once I got into the X-ray program, probably the most challenging class for me was understanding how X-ray produced, because that's something you actually have to know. You have to understand produce so that you can understand how your image is being. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going behind the wall and I'm going boop and taking a picture. I actually understand like what I'm doing. It's called a technique. It's basically like your exposures. It's like you taking a camera and like film and putting it in and like setting your aperture and like the lighting and everything like that. Like we basically have to do something like that in X-ray, but it's called, we have our MAS and our TVP, and the two of those factors go together to produce an image so that the proper density comes out, the proper contrast comes out. So learning all that and working it all in to be able to produce the proper image initially was challenging because it was like listening to Latin.
Well, there's a bunch of them, but the biological, what happens to your cells and things like that. And then the pathology stuff was just mind blowing, challenging, but fascinating. Knowing all the pathologies was tough. Being able to look at an X-ray on a screen and decide what that could be makes you have a whole different level of respect for radiologists and the knowledge they have to have in their brain. That was hard. And as far as prerequisites go, I hated statistics. They made me take statistics and I hated it. And then like all those other silly classes, like writing papers for English. And it's like, I just want to be a rad tech. Why are we doing that?
The general consensus for me and my peers was radiographic physics. That's usually the one that's the most far-fetched. Everything else is kind of, you can picture it, you can piece it together. The anatomy of the body, you can kind of, touch your elbow and say, oh, this is that bone in the elbow. You really can't do that with physics. So that was probably the one that required the most studying. Although it's not really your typical all math physics course, it really has a lot to do with the production of X-rays and the different components within the X-ray unit. So I did find that interesting. So interesting, in fact, that now I teach sonographic physics. So I ended up really liking it. I think it just depends on what you find interesting. And that's going to really make or break what your hardest course is. If anatomy is really not your thing, those probably shouldn't be your field. But I think it just depends what you have the most interest in. That's going to make that course the easiest.